The sky was clear over Lakehurst, New Jersey. On May 6, 1937, the morning was calm, almost serene, with sunlight glinting off the water and the air crisp with early summer warmth. Thousands had gathered to witness the arrival of the Hindenburg, the pride of German engineering, a massive airship floating like a silver cloud above the earth. It was supposed to be a triumph, a symbol of human innovation, luxury in the sky. People cheered, cameras clicked, and reporters leaned forward, eagerly, ready to capture history. Children waved excitedly. Families lined the field, some holding picnic baskets, others with binoculars pressed to their eyes. The hum of engines blended with the murmur of the crowd, and then, without warning, something went terribly wrong. A small flicker of fire appeared near the tail of the airship. At first, spectators thought it was sunlight glinting off metal. Some thought it might be a reflection or a spark from equipment, but the flicker became flame. The flame spread, and in seconds, the Hindenburg was engulfed in fire. The airship, once a marvel of modern engineering, became a roaring inferno. Its hydrogen gas ignited with terrifying efficiency. The aluminum framework glowed red-hot, then melted. Panels fell away as flames raced along the massive hull, leaving a trail of smoke and molten metal in its wake. People screamed. Cameras continued rolling, some focusing on the horror, while others tried to capture the chaos, as if documentation could tame the fear. But no camera could truly convey the sound of metal tearing, the roar of flames, the human terror. Crew members fought to escape, but the descent was brutal. Some jumped from platforms, falling into the ground below. Others were caught in collapsing frames, trapped as the fire consumed everything. The heat was intense. Witnesses described it as a furnace burning from within. Clothing ignited, hair singed, skin blistered. Flames leaped unpredictably as the rigid structure buckled under the heat. The hydrogen explosion tore through the airship, shattering sections of the hull. People who had been standing on the viewing field were thrown off balance by the shockwave. Horses stampeded, vehicles skidded, photographers stumbled, and bystanders fell over one another in frantic attempts to flee. And yet, amidst the chaos, heroism emerged quietly. Crew members helped passengers out of ropes and nets. Strangers pulled screaming children to safety. Some ran straight into flames to rescue those trapped, ignoring the danger to themselves. These acts of courage were overshadowed, however, by the enormity of the disaster. When the inferno finally subsided, 36 people were dead. Over 60 were injured. Hundreds more had witnessed the collapse of what was meant to symbolize progress and human ingenuity, now reduced to ash and twisted metal in a matter of seconds. The world responded in shock. Newspapers ran sanitized photographs, carefully framing survivors and heroic crew members while minimizing the horror. The media wanted triumph over tragedy, clean stories over messy reality. Flames were often cropped or toned down. Human suffering was subtly erased from public perception. But eyewitness accounts told a different story. They spoke of screaming passengers, frenzied crew, and children thrown to safety by strangers. They described the smell of burning flesh, the crackling roar of the hydrogen, and the feeling that the sky itself had betrayed humanity. The Hindenburg was supposed to be a leap forward, a demonstration that the air could be conquered. Instead, it became a grim reminder. Technology, no matter how magnificent, can fail catastrophically. Humanity, in its pursuit of progress, is fragile, exposed, and often unprepared for the consequences. And the fire did not just consume metal, it consumed pride, it consumed innocence, it consumed trust in the new era of air travel. In the decades that followed, the disaster became part of sanitized history lessons. The heroics were celebrated, the mechanics were analyzed, hydrogen was blamed, engineering failures were dissected. But the human horror, the fear, the smell of smoke in the air, the chaos and screams were rarely mentioned. Those who were there carried the trauma for life. Survivors reported nightmares that returned every year on the anniversary. The sound of tearing metal and roaring flames haunted their sleep. Children who watched from the ground were afraid of the sky for years afterward. Entire communities in Lakehurst remembered the day differently than history books recorded it. A day when the sky itself seemed to burn and humanity felt unbearably small. The Hindenburg disaster was more than an accident. It was a story of erased suffering, media control, and fragile triumph. It is a reminder that history often hides the parts of reality that are too raw to face. The airship is gone, the photographs fade, the metal rusts, but the memory of fear, courage, and human loss lingers, hidden beneath the surface of what is recorded. And even now, looking at the skies, one can imagine, what if the next technological marvel fails in the same spectacular, terrifying way? What if progress itself carries within it the seeds of disaster, waiting silently above, like a shadow in the clouds? The morning that began with excitement and admiration had turned into chaos and horror. Smoke still lingered in the air, curling above the remnants of the massive airship. On the ground, survivors wandered in shock, their eyes wide and vacant, some covered in soot, others clutching belongings or lost family members. The silence that followed the roar of the fire was deafening, a stark contrast to the screams and shouts that had filled the field moments before. Witnesses spoke of the airship collapsing like a burning giant, its framework twisting and contorting in ways that defied belief. Sections of aluminum fell with thunderous impact, creating small craters in the ground and sending splinters of debris flying into the crowd. People who had moments ago waved and cheered now struggled to comprehend the destruction, their minds attempting to make sense of what could not be rationally explained. Emergency crews arrived, but even their well-practiced drills could not immediately tame the chaos. Firefighters battled the lingering flames, but the structure was so unstable that entering it was almost suicidal. Soldiers and police helped to pull the injured away from the wreckage, some carrying the badly burned, others guiding terrified children who had witnessed the horror unfold before their eyes. And yet, amidst the suffering, strange pockets of surreal calm existed. Some passengers who had jumped or fallen survived relatively unscathed, frozen in disbelief as they watched the fire consume everything behind them. The contrast between untouched humans and obliterated steel created an eerie tableau, almost like a painting of destruction frozen in time. The media descended quickly, eager to document the event, but their coverage was carefully curated. Photographs captured smiling survivors posed beside emergency personnel, showing bravery and heroism. Yet the raw anguish of those suffering was largely absent. Newsreels emphasized the efficiency of rescue efforts and the resilience of humanity, sanitizing the chaos, the screams, the human cost. The disaster became a spectacle, a controlled narrative that framed tragedy as something almost orderly. But for those who experienced it firsthand, the reality was impossible to sanitize. The burning hydrogen, the collapsing hull, the cries of the trapped and dying were etched into memory. One survivor recounted seeing a crewman holding a small child in his arms as he ran through flames, narrowly avoiding falling beams, while another described hearing metal rip and tear like thunder as the airship disintegrated above him. Families were separated in seconds, and the sensation of helplessness was overwhelming. The Hindenburg was meant to represent progress, a leap forward in human engineering, a symbol of mastery over the skies. But in its final moments, it became a stark reminder of how fragile human ingenuity can be when faced with forces beyond full control. Luxury cabins, gleaming interiors, and meticulous engineering plans could not withstand the unpredictable fury of fire and gas. And yet, the world continued on, eager to move past the incident. Hydrogen airships were gradually phased out, replaced by safer but less glamorous aircraft. Newspapers moved to the next story. War clouds forming in Europe, economic turmoil, political headlines. The horror was archived, compressed into neat paragraphs, footnotes, and sanitized images. But trauma does not obey print or censorship. Survivors carried scars unseen by the public. Emotional wounds festered silently. Children who had witnessed the event carried nightmares into adulthood. Parents struggled to explain how a flying city of silver had suddenly burned like paper. Communities held onto fragmented memories that were inconsistent with the official story. In hindsight, the Hindenburg disaster was more than an accident. It was a collision of human ambition, fragile technology, and unpredictable forces. It revealed how society chooses which horrors to highlight and which to hide, and it left behind a question that lingers still. How much of history is sanitized to preserve comfort, and how much is erased entirely because it is too raw, too human, too devastating to confront? The smoke faded, the ashes cooled, but the lesson remained silent, smoldering and unspoken in the sanitized headlines. And for those who had been there, every glance skyward would forever carry the weight of a fear that could not be captured. A disaster too enormous to forget, and a reminder that progress can burn just as quickly as it rises. Time passed, but the shadow of that morning never truly lifted. The Hindenburg became more than an airship in history books. It became a symbol of fragility. Engineers studied every fragment. Scientists analyzed every spark of fire. Yet no reconstruction could capture the terror experienced by those on the ground or in the air. The survivors' stories rarely matched the official accounts. One woman recalled the air growing thick and heavy as the flame raced past the cabins, suffocating the senses before heat reached her. A boy remembered the smell, a choking, acrid mix of burning hydrogen, scorched wood, and human panic. For him, the sky had turned against the earth itself, and nothing could restore the innocence lost in those minutes. Heroism, while celebrated, had its own human cost. Men who ran through fire to save others carried invisible scars, guilt over those they could not reach, and the weight of witnessing death unfold in slow motion around them. Some survivors never flew again. Some never looked at metal in the same way. Even the cameras, the very tools meant to immortalize the event, could not capture the smell, the heat, or the sheer magnitude of human suffering. Meanwhile, the media continued to sanitize the narrative. Headlines emphasized bravery, progress, and survival, leaving out screams, scorched bodies, and the chaotic panic that defined the disaster. The Hindenburg was a tragedy, neatly wrapped for public consumption, a story of technological failure rather than human loss. But those who were there remembered differently. They remembered the fire cascading down the hull like molten silver, the snapping of girders, the explosive whoosh of hydrogen igniting in midair. They remembered holding loved ones, watching strangers die, and feeling utterly powerless beneath the sky that had betrayed them. Historians today call it a lesson in engineering, a cautionary tale about hydrogen, but it was so much more than that. It was a story of human vulnerability, of how society can erase the uncomfortable, and how technology, no matter how majestic, carries within it the potential for unspeakable disaster. And the eerie part is this. In sanitized photos, the Hindenburg still looks majestic, sleek, shining in the sunlight, floating like a cloud. The inferno is gone, the screams are gone, the human cost has been muted for the ages. Yet, the memory of that day persists for those who lived it. It persists in nightmares, in whispered stories, in families that still pass down fragments of what they saw and smelled. The Hindenburg disaster is a reminder that progress is fragile, that history often hides the raw truth, and that behind every triumph there may be hidden horror waiting to resurface. Even today, the shadow of that morning lingers over innovation, cautioning humanity that no achievement is absolute, no design infallible, and no sky guaranteed to be safe. The Hindenburg may have been a singular event, but its lesson echoes endlessly. Human ambition always walks hand in hand with risk, and sometimes history remembers only the clean version. The fire burned, the airship fell, and the sky, once majestic and serene, became a silent witness to the limits of human control. A warning that resonates far beyond Lakehurst, far beyond 1937, and far beyond any headline we think tells the full story.